That was one of my next question too about. So first off, thank you for that. That was an amazing through line into your
Yes,
history.
sorry.
There's so much more. I know you could have went on so much more, but you did very well to keep it as succinct, but also as broad as you can. Because I think it gives us a very good broad, general view on how you got here and how your love of art was started very young, but it was something that you just kind of did. So it became kind of a thing. But that moment you decided where your cousin was like, okay, do you want to move to London? That must have been a pivotal moment. On the back of that too, you come in here and you learn all these different styles of art. Now you're kind of like you're making that choice, you're making that jump into becoming this is something I might want to do for the next couple of years, rather than something I want to do against something. This is actually something I'm for. Talk to me about those two different. So in art itself, you said you talked about art. You talked about oil painting, and you're learning digital painting. So that's something I'm almost learning too. The differences, the difference between digital painting and oil painting, obviously, right? I see more digital painting now because of the social media and the era that we live in. But also, I love oil paintings, going to museums and stuff like that. What's it like for you? What's your experience? What's your development and your history with those two different types? And on the follow-up question to that, how do you think going ahead in the future, the industry is going to turn? Is it turning more towards digital painting, or do you think oil painting is still the foundation of painting itself?
Okay. Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, um, it's hard to explain because I would first need to understand how much people know of digital painting or in general, like digital manipulation, right? Because usually it's very simple. Like you have a white canvas and maybe, again, if you know Photoshop, again, it's very similar.
Yes.
But white canvas and then you have layers.
Yeah.
So obviously the convenient thing of digital painting is you can fuck up as much as you like or as much as you want or as much as you need. And you can always go back, you can always erase, you can always start. The beauty, though, of paper or canvas or like traditional mediums is you gotta look in. Like once you do something, you're like,
It is it.
yeah, it's it. And if you want to start again, somehow your other work is never gonna look the same as the second one. So it's frustrating, but at the same time, the challenge it's just locks you in somehow.
So let's start with digital painting now. Let's
Okay.
go into depth of that. Okay. So digital painting, as I understand it, is layers, right? So when it's like you mentioned, example of Photoshop, and just layering different types of art on it, and then on that layer it becomes a painting itself. But you can go back and you can go back on the layers. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of digital painting?
First of all, I would precise that when you paint on a layer, considering that you're painting on a layer on top of the background color, the canvas, it's pixel on nothing. So it's all about strokes. It's kind of like the same way as a normal real life paintbrush. Because obviously, if you're, for example, if you're using vectors, you're not painting, right? So when we're talking about digital painting, I mean like the actual use of a digital brush and strokes and color. And it can be a stroke of a pencil if you're drawing or a stroke of a paintbrush if you're painting. Because I do think that sometimes people think of digital painting or digital artwork as, oh, well, like, especially now with AI.
Yes.
I think people just like
Press the
concept
button and then
exactly. I just and I paint a background, right?
yeah.
But it's still very much painting. That's one of the reasons why I still love it.
Yeah.
Coming from a teaching background, like, it's still very much like having to do the first layer of color, and then you do kind of like the differences in contrast, and then you build up yourself to the details, just like you would do with a normal painting.
Yeah, of course.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it makes sense. Okay, so that's the explanation.
Yeah.
What are some disadvantages?
Disadvantages. It is very hard to feel real. And this is one of the challenges that it actually made me fall in love with digital. So maybe it's not a con. I don't know.
For everyone else.
Let me explain.
Go on.
If you come from a traditional background, and you do your first paintings, it looks very flat. Like it looks very unalive, right? And so maybe another example I could do is if you do a sketch, just a very rough pencil on paper. And then you do the same sketch, and this is so frustrating. The same sketch, or you try sketching on an iPad, it will never look as good as a normal sketch on paper, because especially that style that is very disorganized, very dirty, very like rough and messy, on digital, it just doesn't do the same. It just doesn't come as well. It looks very like wonky and like you're trying to make it messy, if that makes sense. So I think one of the hardest things is to make digital look natural, or to make digital not look dead, flat, or like...
That's a skill in of itself.
Yes, because otherwise, the con of digital is that. The other con of digital is you may be spending hours and hours on something, and it doesn't give you the same sense of I made something out of nothing than holding a painting in your hands. Because it's pixels. Like, if you think about it, unless you print it, sometimes you get that back once you print, and you're like, oh, okay.
Like, in your hands.
Exactly. Like, I made this. And you get that real life sensation. On a screen, it does feel intangible, which is not as satisfying as an actual piece of paper, which is, again, the advantage of traditional. It's empty. It's not real.
It's not real. Speak on that more than like that, because I think you're describing something that's like inexplicable about painting on like canvas with oil painting. What is it? What is it about that? What is it about the process of painting on oil canvas that you yourself love, or that you like are drawn to?
Of painting on oil.
Or painting on oil, yeah.
It's literally the opposite, like the cons.
It's opposite.
Turn into pros. Turn into the fact that it's very tangible. It's very real. It's you're kind of manipulating matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because especially with oil, which is very much, I don't know if you ever use oils.
No, I haven't. No.
First of all, it stinks.
Yeah, oh, really?
It's literally toxic for you. Like,
you guys just like Scotch.
Yes, exactly. It's literally a joke in the community of like, I would probably die 40 of respiratory problems because you breathe that stuff in, you touch it, you burn your skin. Yeah, it's horrible. But apart from this very unpleasant smell, when the color comes out of the tube, it is very much like, almost like clay inside. Unless you dilute it. If you dilute it, obviously it becomes liquid paint, whatever. But obviously that's your preference, that's your choice. Each artist has its own way to work with the matters. But it is very much like matters. So some artists even sculpt with it, because if you're using a very thick way, again, it's like manipulating a paste on the canvas. And again, that sensation of the materiality of it in front of your face and on your hands, something that unfortunately with digital you never have. Again, another pro of digital that is a con of traditional is with digital I can paint anywhere, in any place, in any time, on the plane. I love painting on the plane, and I can imagine myself with a Ito, Ryanair, Brainsy.
the smell and everything.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. So it is more accessible digital, and then but with canvas, it's more kind of like real, and like you were saying, tangible. Let's now zoom into your kind of artistic style. So I was obviously having a look at some of your art before today, and I found it difficult to pinpoint a style. Like, I don't know much about art, so that's probably right. But what would you say your style is? I was thinking, is it surrealism, or is it something else? Obviously, is it something unique that you're trying to create? Talk to me about your style. What is it that you're trying to go for? What is it that you hope people see from it?
You know, it's interesting that you said, like, I don't know what your style is, because honestly, neither do I. And in a way, I don't, like, I think now I'm kind of like getting there. But for the longest time, I was like, I don't know what my thing is. It's true that usually with artists that kind of made themselves whole, have such, the whole point is they have such a distinct style that it's recognizable, it's clarifiable, it's describable. I think I'm still getting there.
Yes.
And at the same time, when you say, like, I don't know where you fall, I agree with you, because I do think I kind of have, a dichotomy there happening. I have my more serious, academic, acceptable, more effort put into it type of style, type of art. And then I have my silly squiggling drawing of a flower guy with a tiny penis coming out. Like,
I will talk about that later. So then that's also funny and amazing.
that's the thing. Like, I kind of like to do both.
Mm-hmm.
I think at some point I was like, why do I have to choose? Like, it's kind of the same thing with the digital and the traditional. I was like, why do I have to pick between the two? I really enjoy doing both. I'll just do both. And the same has been with my style.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I want to do, I'll do it. And then I just discovered that at the end of the day, the more you do anything that comes into your brain, the style has a way to make itself recognizable.
Absolutely.
Because it kind of happened to me a couple of years ago with a friend of mine went like, oh, that's kind of like your style. Like when you do like the red background thing. I was like, oh, I do that. But it's so crazy. I don't realize that I do it until somebody tells me that's you or that's your thing, kind of. Or that reminds you of your style. Because before that, you just don't see it.
Yeah, 100% agree. So when you mentioned that, actually, the fact that to just do things that come out of your mind, it becomes something you get used to almost, right?
Basically.
I had that same kind of realization in poetry too. Like, because it was like, the more I did it, the more I realized, oh, okay, this is something that if I allow it to happen, you know, I think it's also linked to the creative process. Just another question I want to ask you too. Because for me, my process is like idea. I remember talking about this with you. It's like idea that comes from anywhere, and then letting that idea channel an emotion within me, and then that emotion will spark the words, and then refinement of those words to make sense of the emotion. So it's like a whole process where even I don't know what's going to happen until the end of it, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of what I was going for, kind of.
But also, you crafted that process yourself.
Yeah.
That's the thing I like. Nobody gave you a book like me, like, this is your process.
Yeah.
You made that for
You make
yourself.
it yourself. And I think that's because in search of a style,
Yeah.
we kind of think, okay, none of this is working. Like, I have to find something that will make me to do this more easily, almost, more kind of naturally. And so you do what comes naturally towards you. What is your natural creative process? What is it that you find that comes naturally towards you for you to create?